So you wanted to jump forward? You want to talk about Minneapolis?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Have you talked about this yet?
No, I am always slow to talk about this stuff because the information that comes out when these things happen is almost always inaccurate to begin with, or the least verified. I'm not in the breaking business model, you know what I mean? So I'm not constantly or terminally online, especially in January. I got my screen time down to about an hour a day, which was hugely beneficial. So I was aware that this happened, but not inundated with the details. But I mean, I'm certainly aware that it did happen, but I have yet to talk openly about it.
Yeah, the situation, there's the, Renee Good and then the Alex Pretti situation.
Separated by what, 48, 72 hours?
Yeah, not long.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot that we know, and there's absolute gaps that have been filled by the assumptions of many people as per. That's typically what happens. But the Alex Pretti circumstance, I haven't commented on until now. And people were like, hey, why aren't you giving input to this? You must be, I don't know, a bootlicker, supportive, whatever it is. One of the reasons that I haven't commented is I was going to wait for this. And this was supposed to be out the week prior. It would have been closer to
It'll be out in
the
6
timing.
days. In Monday. Yeah.
And so, and also, to your point, a lot of information that was initially released where people jumped on the bandwagon, they were contradicting themselves 24 hours later. Yeah. For example, this idea that Alex Pretti was just an innocent protester that was involved in a confrontation with protecting a woman as an ICU nurse. It's in his nature, and then he gets murdered. That is not true. I don't believe that. But
what have you seen that counters that?
Well, one, it has been reported that he was part of a group of about 50 people that were professional agitators. Mm-hmm. Two, a video came out where 11 days prior to this, he was seen on video. A lot of people claimed it was AI. Mm-hmm. I actually looked at the initial video and went, it kind of looks like AI because of the perspective. It was like he was shot with a red camera where everything was like really weird and it was looking weird. But then there's multiple angles, and then the family actually confirmed, and then law enforcement actually confirmed that it is him.
It's when he kicked the taillight, right?
Yes. He spit on an officer. He kicked the taillight.
I mean, I'm aware that happened. What I've seen and what I'll disagree with is people justifying his death based off the actions from 11 days ago. It gives you context and insight into the person and perhaps their motivation, but has absolutely nothing to do with what occurred that day.
Yeah.
Because the officers there that day, I guarantee you, were unaware of those actions 11 days prior.
For sure. But my big question was, why was he not arrested? Because it's certainly a felony to obstruct justice, to interfere with a investigation or an ongoing execution of duties and responsibilities of a law enforcement officer. Their whole tactic was kind of intervening.
Yeah, this is the video.
Yeah. It looks really fake. It actually looks like it's not real. The way it's filmed.
That is definitely a different camera. Did you see just the zoom in? I mean, I guess you could do that with an iPhone.
Yeah, he's using an SLR is what we determined.
And here's the thing, this seems to be this guy, and it gives you context for who he is. That is a good question. Why didn't they arrest him for those actions right there?
So the general understanding is because they didn't have the time, and they rolled him up, and honestly, if they arrested him in this moment for the felony that he just committed, then it wouldn't have happened, obviously. Yeah. So let's break down just the Alex Pretti moment for a little bit.
Of his death.
His death. Yeah. So we are good at critically thinking through these scenarios because I don't have any opinion on either side of this. You could ask me for my opinion. I'll give you an opinion based on my understanding. But in this particular situation, I'm very objective at how I look at it. One, he does interfere with the executions of these law enforcement's duties. That's a felony. It's obstruction of justice. It's a federal felony. And so he's in the conduct of executing a felony.
What was the obstruction, just being there?
Basically interfering in the middle of their movement, because I believe at some point what they were doing is, just like the other video, getting in between the patrol cars. As he's asked to step back, he's given lawful orders, and then he again continues to interfere.
Okay.
He's holding a cell phone in his right hand. He's not doing anything that obviously justifies a shooting.
Yeah.
But the standard for self-defense for law enforcement and Graham v. Connor, this 89 ruling, has to do with objective reasonableness, right? Is it objective? Is it reasonable that a law enforcement officer in that law enforcement officer's position, via their own perspective, would think that somebody was seriously going to be harmed or killed? It's not just killed, it's actually serious bodily injury or death. And what changes is you have two perspectives. One, the law enforcement perspective, which is they're given the benefit of the doubt because they're in their conduct of their professional duties. They're doing a job. The other person, what is their motivation? Well, if they're a professional agitator, meaning the video 11 days proves that this is kind of their MO, and they're doing that, they're not just innocent protesters, which would change the perspective, right? Because if it's like he was just protesting innocently, he saw a woman was injured or hurt, and then he tried to interject, then you would ask, well, what are his motivations, right?
Was this actually declared a protest? What is the difference between people being there and filming law enforcement and a protest?
So,
because I don't know the legal line in the sand on
the protests versus what they're doing right here is the difference between this idea of peacefully protesting and staying in a public area and not interfering with law enforcement officers. And I think that's the big differentiation in these scenarios, is these people are directly interjecting themselves and in some cases interdicting police movement,
which is that threshold beyond their First Amendment protected right.
Because immediately immediately they become felons and they're in the conduct or execution of committing a felony, right? Which is different in the perspective of how you would view or judge them, right? If the person wasn't committing a crime and then randomly shot in the back, obviously that would be murder. If they're in the conduct of committing a felony, they're being stopped or prevented, then that changes the standard, right? It becomes more objectively reasonable, but via the standard. So here's the problem, and you've alluded to this already. One, was it a good shoot? In my opinion, it was not a good shoot.
I agree.
One of the things to consider, though, is based on what perspective. Because most of the analysis and people who are judging this, some experts, some not, is that they're analyzing it from a perspective, from a cell phone camera perspective. Like even this camera perspective right here. This is not the perspective of the officer's senses.
It's one of the same things I said about the man who was standing in front of the vehicle. All of these different angles that show what happened are not what he's going to be either found guilty or adjudicated to be found not guilty of in court. It's his POV, not an outside POV that he doesn't have.
Yes.
Because people are saying you can look at the tires. From the original position where they're standing, I challenge somebody to go in front of a vehicle like that. You can't tell the direction of the tires.
You can't. And so if you take the standard, and we're talking about somebody who's objective and reasonable, would other officers feel the same? Well, apparently only 2 officers shot, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be the question. Like, wait a minute. Well, if it was reasonable, why didn't nobody else shoot? Well, here's a problem. One, as they're wrestling with this guy, one of the officers sees that he has a firearm in a holster underneath his shirt and announces gun. Now, it's hard to find out what that SOP means per the department, but in our line of work, downrange, if you said gun, somebody was getting killed.
Yeah, but we're not downrange. This is Minneapolis.
Just as a contrast.
Yeah.
If we were downrange and we said gun, that would be our SOP. In these particular situations where somebody says gun, they're likely announcing that they see a gun that's visible, right? Well, one, that's going to spike everybody's central nervous systems if they're not already spiked, and they're going to be hyper alert, cortisol, adrenaline, and they're going to be in fight or flight nearly. If they're trained...
Should they be?
They shouldn't be. And this is the point.
Yeah.
As Border Patrol agents who do things like this, it is my opinion that, one, no federal agent should ever be put in this situation, ever. They shouldn't be containing any objectives, standing outside with active people interfering. That would be like if they took a troop of DevGru and said, we're going to have you block off a position while an operation is taking place on this target. That would never happen. You know why? Because if people came out and tried to manage this, especially in a civilian circumstance, they wouldn't know how to contain the situation.
Well, it's not what they're trained, tooled, and equipped for.
It's not what they're equipped to do. Border Patrol is not equipped to do things like this. Even when you see them tackling somebody and dealing with that person in a city street in America, that's not what they're prepared to do. And so, one, that's a bad tactic from leadership, from Border Patrol in this case, ICE in most cases, that boggles my mind. To me, it's a failure in leadership. You should never put your guys out there in a compromising position. What's the ask? Use more sound tactics. Go hit these targets at night. Minimize the amount of exposure your guys have on the ground.
Yeah.
Be surreptitious. Guys with kit that says ICE, that's as overt as it gets. You want the confrontation. It seems like you want the confrontation.
Well, it's legally required as well.
Yeah. Well, it seems like if you have guys standing in the city streets, you're following into what I believe is a Marxist operation, which is how do you get national attention to, and all this propaganda that's being pushed to come to your side? You elicit emotions. You exploit the fact that there is going to be a confrontation. You use politicians to antagonize people to get out there, hit the city streets, and then you deliberately plan it. This protest and this exposure is a deliberate op. It's been proven through signal chats, through communications, through paid actors, some of which are getting $80,000 to $100,000 salaries to be professional antagonists. So it's the recipe that's always going to, in these federal law enforcement's case, they're going to be on the losing side of it. So somebody says gun, then an officer pulls the gun out of the holster, right? Which is the right thing to do, right? If you're dealing with somebody and you have the ability to remove it.
You either remove it or you make sure it can't be removed by containing it with your own hands.
Exactly. So he moves it, he announces his gun. I think he did all the right things. Mm-hmm. And then there's this question of whether or not there was an accidental discharge. From all the evidence, which I've reviewed all the videos, it doesn't appear to me that he had an accidental discharge. Yeah. They say it, but when they say it, his finger's extended on the gun, he's holding it, and you don't see the gun recoil at all. And it happened to be a SIG P320.
No, it did not.
Huh?
Did it really?
It was a SIG 320.
Oh, the potential AD was the gun that was removed from, what's his first name, Alex?
Alex Pretti. Yeah.
That is, it was a 320, yeah. No, that gun did not go off.
That gun did not go off. Yeah. I did not see any evidence of that. There was videos pointing to or there looks like there's a round shot on the ground. That was likely from the other officer's point of view or perspective. So I don't think that happened. But if a shot goes off, so the gun call happens, the shot goes off, and then somebody's reacting in fear, then that's what you get, right? But here's what I'll say. Is it going to be a manslaughter charge? The answer is probably no. You know why? Because all the officer has to say, who, by the way, was on the opposite side of where the cameras are, is when there was a gun call, when there was a situation where the gun was removed, I didn't see it. And when that gun call was made, I saw him reach towards the right side of his waistband, whether or not he saw it or not. That's all he has to say. And I thought he was going to pull the gun and shoot and kill us. And I used deadly force because I was in the position where I did not want to take a chance. And I thought it was objective and reasonable for me to defend all the officers around me from serious bodily harm or death. And that's probably good enough in that particular case. Now,
good enough for a courtroom, I agree.
Yes. And the court of public opinion, we have more experience in this recently. Remember when we taught decision point? In that course, it derived from this understanding that most people knew how to shoot guns. Like you could draw a pistol and shoot a paper target all day long. That's the easy part. The execution of your technical skill sets, this autopilot, this autonomic response, that's easy. The hard thing is deciding whether or not it was the time and place and it met your personal criteria for defending your life. And every scenario that we ran, With civilians, how many times were we surprised?
100%.
Every single time. Like the guy's walking with his proposed spouse from the gym into their vehicle. They get interdicted by a bum who wants to ask for money. The guy defending the girl shoots the bum in the back 5 times and then justifies it saying, well, I thought he was going to hurt my wife. Yeah, but in this scenario, we actually programmed it to where he was only going to ask for money. He wasn't going to physically touch your spouse. And you shot him in the back 5 times and you thought that was justified? Well, I still think it's justified. And they would go to their grave for that.
What about the guy who was just trespassing and he has his cell phone? You know?
Yeah. He goes to pull his cell phone out and he gets schwacked.
Every time.
Every time.
Yeah.
And here's what you should understand. When I was a FLETC instructor for in this case, the CIA, I had to go to the farm to go to firearms instructor development course, FIDC, where it made me federal qualified to basically qual any federal law enforcement officers before they went to training or to sustain their training, mostly CIA personnel. But I could train anybody. I could run FBI quals. I could run Border Patrol and ICE quals. So in that training, there was no OP4 related training in these type of scenarios, like the scenarios we ran in Decision Point. So how do you know if you're capable of doing that? You don't, because you have a pro timer or the call of threat. You're taught to conditionally react based off of that. You draw your pistol and you shoot a target. That has nothing to do with critically thinking through a high stress scenario and deciding whether or not to shoot or not shoot. And that's the biggest mistake law enforcement makes. And this is likely what happened. He heard the gun call. He heard potentially a shot break. It might have been another shooter on his team. And then he mag dump. He shot 8 to 10 rounds into this guy because he thought he was a potential threat. Now, it's justified in his head, but the reality is, did he have specific criteria for him to live with? In Utah, I just read the story yesterday. They just determined that a law enforcement officer that was involved with I think he potentially was illegal, that drove away. He was shot. He shot 2 rounds in the back of this vehicle with an AR-15 as the guy was fleeing. One of the rounds hit him, didn't kill him, but the courts have determined, the new attorney general has determined it was a bad shoot. And they're going to now determine whether or not criminal charges are to be brought. So you've seen the videos. A guy backs up into the cop, starts driving forward. The cop draws his pistol and mag dumps the back of the vehicle. And then he kills or he doesn't kill. Let's say he kills the guy. Is that a justified shooting? Well, it depends on the perspective of the officer. If the person was in the execution phase of conducting a felony that was going to potentially seriously injure somebody or kill somebody, including the public, based on his perspective, he's likely going to get away with it. Do I think it was a good shoot? Absolutely not. Because his criteria should have been, he should have, one, seen a gun in his hand, seen specific actions that he was going to kill somebody, in order to justify him shooting that guy 8 times in the back. Now, was it a murder? No, I think it was just super negligent. Was it an assassination? No, I think they just don't have good enough training. But again, the perfect recipe for disaster is a deliberate campaign by radical extremists to elicit these type of responses, and then federal agencies buying into it by setting the conditions in the environment for this exact thing that they wanted.
And they're not trained, tooled, or equipped to do the job.
They're not.
This one dude getting dogpiled by 7 people, if you know how to control somebody, that's a one-person problem.
One-person problem.
It's in these situations are so nuanced too. Like, you can go yes, no questions. Like, do I support immigration enforcement? Yes. Do I support these particular type of tactics? No.
No.
Do I support why ICE exists? Yes. Do I want people who are in this country illegally, hopefully starting at the top of the wedding cake, the most violent criminals, working your way down, removed from this country, or at least going back to the country of origin where they came from? Yes. Do I want to see people getting shot in the street like this? No.
No.
Do I support the tactics that those officers used that day? No.
Yeah.
Does that make ICE an organization that should not exist? No.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
nuanced.
It's incredibly nuanced. And, you know, one of the biggest things that upsets me about this, 3 people specifically, the narrative out of their mouths so quickly. Kristi Noem, This is domestic terrorists. This is within like hours.
Talking about the gun, bringing a gun to a protest is somehow an illegal act. Yeah.
Well, that was Kash Patel.
Yeah.
You can't have a gun at a protest. Like, would you, Michael, just pull up some go-ahead armed COVID protests and let me know about how you can't bring a gun to a protest? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Constitutional right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Now, can you do it when you're in the execution of a crime? No. And people said, well, he committed a felony 11 days before, so therefore he was a felon and shouldn't be able to carry it. I'm like, listen, I'm not a, this is January 6th, but. No, this is I thought we couldn't have guns at a protest. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Now, having said that, of course, there are state and local laws that may prohibit you from doing so. But my understanding is he had a legal carry permit. And that's kind of why I asked, like, was it declared as a protest? Because it may change the laws. But as far as I could tell, he was exercising his Second Amendment right. You know, you got Kristi Noem, the head of ICE, saying, you know, almost instantly, and in doing so, calling somebody a domestic, and maybe they were found to be a domestic terrorist in the investigation that would occur. But she has no way of demonstrably proving that in the moment. All she's trying to do is shed any accountability from her organization. And I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Kash Patel, dude, if you sit in the office of you are the head of all law enforcement, the apex of the pyramid, and you better know the fucking law. And you better understand the Constitution as well. And if you are unsure of what it is that you're going to say, don't say anything. And then you got Trump walking. And again, it was tough to hear the exact question, but he makes an off-the-cuff remark of, well, you can't have guns at those type of things. And again, all of those things are an attempt to shed any level of responsibility from the federal agencies that, guess what, Trump, this starts at the top. This is your policy. And again, at a baseline level, I agree with the policy, but these type of tactics is going to turn just about everybody against you.
Yeah.
So those three people with that narrative almost immediately, like that is the exact opposite of leadership. Do you need to burn your organization at the stake? No, you don't. But let's make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Let's look at the training. Let's make, like you said, tooled, equipped, trained, all of those things. Is this the job that you should be doing? I mean, probably right now, the most vocal people who should be talking about whether or not that is a good shoot or a no shoot is actually law enforcement themselves. Mm-hmm. You want to maintain integrity in your organization. When your organization messes up, you admit it, you acknowledge it, you learn from it, and you move forward. It doesn't mean you have to burn your organization to the ground, but if you sit there and piss on me and tell me it's rain, nobody's ever going to listen to you again.